What's going on, my buddy Mark? How you been, brother?
I've been good, man. I got my t-shirt in.
Oh wow, very nice. That even looks nicer than mine. Maybe I should wear mine a little bit. I didn't want to wear it when you didn't have one. People are gonna
Yeah.
be asking about the merch before we've even really got it ready. But yeah, that's cool. I definitely want to thank the audience for their overwhelming feedback and responses and support for the Reef Therapy podcast. Me and Mark, we really try to drill down into the nuts and bolts, the skeletal frame of things, and really try to elucidate some heavy, some dense topics. But today we've got a really fun one. We're just going to talk about the things we love about the modern reef aquarium hobby. But before we jump into that, your tank is coming along, right, Mark? You've
Yeah.
been getting your hands wet a lot very recently.
Yeah, the beauty of working from home, is I can do lunch break little tasks and stuff. So, yeah, I got some rock sculpting done in the garage. That was a lot of fun. I put some old Kessels on there that I had laying around just to get some lighting going and filled up with tap water.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
And then, my media reactor is just one of those bulk resupply, repurposed RO carbon housing. So I just put a
You
carbon
mean a
block in
water
there.
purification cartridge?
There you go. Yeah. I don't know what you call those
Canister.
filter housings. So yeah, I just put a carbon block in there and I've been running that. I may be a little paranoid and run, I've got Cooper's Orb in the stash. So I may run just a little bit of that as a precautionary measure as well. Not so much for the copper. I think the carbon's going to take care of the copper, but
Do you
um,
know that you have copper in there?
well, I got copper pipes, so there's that. That
I,
doesn't
I looked into
mean,
this a
yeah,
lot when I moved into the studio because it's got copper pipes going into there, and only new copper pipes leach
hmm,
stuff out. I mean, if you have water sitting in them for like a really long time, it
yeah,
might give you pulses of copper, but it's really only when they're new. When they're old, they've got a nice oxidized patina that just prevents that, mostly mitigates most of that leaching.
yeah. I've never had it tested, but again, I'm not so worried about that. Like I said, the carbon's going to handle that, but
All the
just
sand you're about to put in there, that's going to absorb it right
yeah,
away.
yeah. So yeah, it's been fun. Now I just gotta figure out what I'm gonna do as far as lighting. I think I may just get motivated this weekend, depending on how much coffee I drink. And I was gonna do like a slow transfer a few corals at a time. Maybe put a canary in the coal mine coral in there and see how it goes. But I
You're at
may just
home, man. You know what's happening. Like
yeah.
I think you are a little bit motivated to just insta reef.
Well, yeah. I mean, when yeah. I mean, just move it all over on a Saturday and call it good.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, I have actually been working on one of my smaller tanks, a nano reef tank. I decided when it was time for an update, so we filmed that, and it should be up before this
is this
session is
the
released.
Red Sea Nano?
Yeah, that thing went
Okay.
a whole year. I wasn't really, I wasn't trying to play in the space of, oh, no water changes. I just
Yeah.
wanted to see. I just wanted to see one time what would happen if I set up a reef tank in one day and then did not put my hands in it in any way, shape, or form for a whole year. And I was quite surprised. I mean, I wanted to put my hands in there. I wanted to shuffle some corals around because you never put all the corals exactly where you want the first time. But I recently decided that was going to be an awesome showcase for my sun polyps. I'm not a huge zoanthid junkie. I don't really buy zoanthid frags, except for super classics, right? Like Purple Death, Purple People Eater, Utter Chaos, and Bam Bams. Just the super classics. And but I've always loved sun polyps because they're large and they're showy.
So you're
Um,
talking Paleotha grandis.
Palithoa grandis, yeah.
Paleothoa,
They come
sorry.
in so many different varieties,
Yeah.
but all like a mixture of like brown, black, mint, green, greener, forest green, but in various combinations. So I fragged a couple of those up today, and I had never. I'd just been growing in and growing in and growing in them, and I decided, let's be a good time to put those in that tank, make it a little bit of a large zoanthid showcase. But one side effect of never putting my hands in the tank for like the first year is the clownfish in there. Oh my freaking God, man. You'd
Mean.
think they were maroons. They're just mocha storms.
Yeah.
They're not just mean. It's like, all right, you want to bite me once or twice, that's fine. I can handle it, right? But they're just incessant, and they grab a tiny bit of your skin and then just pull away. And it's like got like a bee sting, like a very minor bee sting, like 15 times. And at first I was just like, oh, you're cute, you're biting my hand. Then after like 10 or 15 minutes, because I'm trying to escape the tank and put some zoanthids in place, I just like cussing out loud and just going after the fish. And like, ah, those guys are, man, they are something else for sure. So my hand's a little tore up. You can't see it, but maybe it's just like
That's a bad
my,
combo, man. Pissing off some palithoas while a clownfish is breaking your skin.
yeah,
It's like
I'm
a recipe for
super
danger.
lucky, but I don't take it for granted that I have never developed any hyperallergenic reactions. Some people who work with corals a long time, people who frag corals all the time, and people who handle corals often, they develop a hypersensitivity to either euphyllia or anemones or zoanthids or soft corals. You know the people. Like I know some people who've had reef tanks forever who cannot put their hands in the tank anymore without sleeving up. And I'm very lucky that I've never had anything like that. But I tried to put some like latex gloves on and they didn't fit. They all broke. I was really trying, but I was wearing some goggles and there was no squirts going on. But we let the palithoa really slough off before putting them back in the tank, and then I add a little bit of carbon, and I'll probably do a couple. Well, just one water change when I get the palithoas in place. So sounds like we've both been really staying busy with our reef tanks.
Yeah, yeah. It's nice, when you have a tank that's been on autopilot for so long and things are going well, like that's a fortunate situation, but it gets fun to get back into the building stage and,
I'm
you know,
so glad that's where you're at.
yeah, it's been fun. I know I've been texting you a ton just because you get excited about something and then my wife's like, I don't care. you know? So I'm like, well, I got to share it with somebody.
Yeah,
So,
no, that was really fun, and I know that Mark and I sometimes sound like grumpy old dudes, even though we're not that old, firmly on the beginning end of middle age. But we have a really fun topic we want to share with you guys, and it's not why we love reef aquariums, but what we love about the reef aquarium world right now. I mean, just everything, livestock, gear, and just the people. And man, I'm happy about everything, but I definitely have something at the top of my list that's like number 1, 2, 3 through 10. So why don't you start off with what are some of your favorite things
oh,
about the reef aquarium hobby today? And Reef Therapy Session is officially on.
well, I think that is, well, maybe I shouldn't put it this way because it would eliminate the ability to talk about the individual pieces of it. But I guess let's start with tanks. Let's just start at the most fundamental piece of equipment, right? Reef ready tanks that are actually reef ready is so nice.
Explain.
So again, not to go back to the dark ages, but
Let me stop you for 1 second. I
yeah,
think the only way that we can shine a light on everything we love about the modern reef keeping era is by comparing and contrasting with our roots. So we're not going to keep trying to say back in the day, but we will.
well, so the term reef ready meant like if you bought a tank, meant it had an internal overflow or two, and that was it.
That was
And
it.
the stand would usually be less than 30 inches tall, with no actual care in the world about what a reef hobbyist needs. And you had to work with that. So obviously a lot of people built their own stands, this and that. Sumps, were mostly just wet dries that were available. So people would repurpose old fish tanks. Now reef ready means literally, I mean, if you start to look at, some of the vendors like Red Sea, Waterbox, but even going to like Elos and all of those guys, you're getting a tank that is reef ready in terms of overflow box, but you're getting something that where the stand is actually accommodating for reef equipment. You may get a sump with it that actually is well designed, and then of course we've already talked about the beauty of pre-assembled plumbing. But
Mm.
I mean, that to me is a reef-ready tank, right? And then I haven't even touched upon the all-in-ones, right? Um, the sheer plethora of all-in-ones that are available, and I guess one that comes with a sump and plumbing, but isn't an all-in-one. But I meant where it's built into the tank. That's huge. I mean, just the availability of tanks that are exactly perfect for reef keeping is probably the first fundamental thing I love about the hobby right now.
Yeah, so I worked retail for a long time, and Reef Ready was so far from ready, right? So like if I, you know, works with a customer and just they decided to pull the trigger, first thing they would do is select the size of the tank that they wanted, they could afford. And I always tell them like, hey, this is going to be like double that price once we add all the gear. And they would pick out a tank and, usually be like a tank stand and lid combo maybe. And then I would tell them to just like wait for like 15 to 20 minutes so I could gather all the equipment, the plumbing, because All Glass Aquarium, when it existed, had a plumbing kit. Then you had to buy one for each overflow that was ginormous inside the tank, and it took him way too long to get some quieting features in there. And then once you picked out the sump and the pump and the skimmer and the heater, like you still got to put together some tubing because we didn't really hard plumb at the time, and the barbs and the vacuum hose to drain. It was, it was just such a process. If you wanted to,
Yeah.
before all-in-ones were really common, if you wanted something bigger than 2 feet long, it was really involved. And now, a prospective or existing reef aquarium hobbyist can say, I want that tank, and it's just wow. It is so much more streamlined than it's ever been.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, like I said before, in a way, it also levels the playing field because I used to joke to be a reef keeper, you had to be a woodworker, you had to be a plumber, you had to be an electrician.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And then a chemist.
yeah,
And then a biologist.
yeah, right. Everything else on top of that. You don't really need to be all those things anymore. And that to me is a big upside.
Um, there's a part of me. It's funny. Like right before we jumped on Squadcast, somebody in my local group was like literally asking for opinions about rimless tanks, and I just commented, "What else is there?" And to be honest, like I don't really care if it's rimless and if it's Euro braced. Just the old school tanks had those thick glass braces in the middle, and when they were clean, they were fine. They were reflecting a little bit of glass, but you got dust and salt crust on top of that cross tank brace, and then you got algae growth underneath. God, it's probably been like 15 years since I had to clean the underside of like a trans aquarium brace. I don't miss the braces. Like,
No,
I
me
don't
neither.
care if it's Euro braced or rimless, but that brace that would just screw up your lighting. It it would be so like, all right, here's a great example. Like if you had a 4-foot tank, you could put two metal halides over it. If you had a 5-foot tank though, how are you supposed to light up the middle, especially with that brace in there? And it was just such a freaking challenge. And that is the real magic of rimless tanks. The current and even like middle generation of reefers, they don't know how good they have it. And I think I'm going to say this over and over again as we go down the list. But also the newer tanks, it very quickly went from a novelty to standard issue to have a continuous siphon overflow. I've been calling
Yeah,
it a continuous siphon
that's a good
overflow
point.
long before the Herbie, long before the bean animal, because it's descriptive. And God, that took off really fast.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Durso was the way of life, and then
Don't forget the Stockman,
yep, the
the
Stockman
Stockman
standpipe.
mod, and then the Durso.
But yeah, I mean, that's a really good point because these mass-produced reef tanks have. I mean, the Red Sea, that's pretty much a Herbie, right? It doesn't have that third overflow so that you can have a slight trickle in the secondary, like a bean. But you know, it's funny that that mod is now a common feature in these mass-produced tanks. And
Yeah, the the Durso took 10 years to show up in the overflow kit from All Glass Aquarium, and then the continuous siphon overflow was like 3. But then it's like super standard issue. You cannot sell a higher end all reef ready aquarium without it.
that's true, yeah. Yeah, I remember the all glass tanks for a while had the weird floaty thing. It was like a float valve that slid into the overflow pipe, and depending on the water level, would adjust up and down. And
I
you know,
super vaguely remember that, but just the fact
it was
that you
terrible.
can buy commercially made aquariums with these huge quality of life features, you don't know until you remember the days where like you were hitting that YouTube on the side of the tank trying to get the air bubble to go down. Oh my god. Yeah, no, we have it really, really good. I'm glad you started with tanks. What else do you want to say about the tanks? I mean, I know how you feel about the low clarity glass. You know, you want it to be a little bit stronger and resist the scratchings. But man, when I've just got like a tiny bit of carbon or shortly after a water change and a good wipe down of the tank, my fish are floating in air.
Yeah, no, I know I'm in the minority there, and I definitely see the upside to the low iron glass being so popular now and so readily available, right? That used to be like a custom thing for hobbyists to seek out with a
That used
builder.
to be an upsell,
Yeah,
right? And I'm thinking to myself, like, I don't think you can get an innovative marine, Cade, water box, Red Sea, Pro Clear without it.
yeah,
That used to be such a premium feature of having that high clarity glass, and yeah, now it's just standard. I think I have one tank that was custom made. It's the Mangrove Cube that has average clarity glass. You can barely tell, but you have to look for it.
well, people would try to save a buck too, where they would only use that glass on the front panel, but not the sides or the back.
I think
Um,
that's still a thing for the larger tanks.
is it? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, if you get a super custom tank, who cares about the back and the sides,
Yeah.
or if it's going to go in wall. But anything that's ready made, man, I would be surprised if they weren't even using the high clarity glass for the bottom.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Just because
probably
it's
easier
there.
just to source one glass for everything than try to keep tabs on what is what, and you know. But yeah, so I figured I'd start. I mean, there's so much in gear in general that I love in today's reef keeping world, but the tank is like step one, right? That's the one thing you absolutely need. So, um,
We got to talk about lights next, right?
yeah,
Lights are the sexiest thing. They're not the most important thing, but they are the sexiest thing. And man, someone had a comment where they wanted us to discuss burnout, and I'm not sure if that warrants a complete episode. I don't want to spend an hour talking about getting burned out, but I do remember a small interval of time, probably right around 2010, where I was starting to feel it. The corals and the shows hadn't really come on, and we didn't have this explosion of stuff. And then I got my first LED strip light, and it was just an average blue, barely 1 watt, just something that you wouldn't even think of using today. And it just blew my mind. Just average blue LEDs, just one little strip light, supplemented by other lights. The colors and the shimmer and the colors and the fluorescence. I was like, we've seen these colors forever, but now we can really see them, right? I used to call them imaginary colors. I don't know if you remember me using that term. Oh, you can kind of imagine some of these shades here and there, and now you don't have to imagine at all.
yeah. My first wow moment with LEDs was when the moonlighting stuff came out, and they were,
Mm.
those I guess royal blue LEDs, but they were put into like little moonlight modules. And I think actually I was with you, and we visited a friend of yours who just had normal metal halides for the daytime, but at night he had those moonlights on, and that just black light level glow in the dark effect just blew
Yes.
my mind. Because I mean, I was used to actinics and all of that, but I was like, okay, that's pretty interesting. But it
Just
didn't
to
even dawn on me that this makes me sound stupid, but it didn't dawn on me that that would eventually proliferate into full on lighting.
really, I guess I think it was maybe like 2006. I had a primer with Tulio about LED lighting, and he had this LED sample chip in his pocket, and we were sitting down at dinner, and he would just like pull it out and like shine it in my eyes from underneath the table, and I was like, "Oh my God, that is so much light." But for what you were talking about was the original Mark Weiss Moonlight. It was three
That's
quarters
it.
of a watt. It was connected to like a half inch, no, like a 1/4 inch or maybe 3/8 inch lock line, so you can move it around. It had a suction cup because magnets were too high tech only 15 years ago. And anybody that's listening or watching to this right now, I am dying for an original Mark Weiss Moonlight, new in the box. It doesn't even have to work. So hit me up if you have one of those. I will really want to add it to my collection. It's like just a pivotal moment, and it's interesting that you didn't see the writing on the wall. I mean, I don't think anybody did, but that would happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, I don't think that white LEDs had really become commonplace yet. Like I remember reading about how creating the blue LED helped them solve the riddle to be able to create a white LED spectrum.
They won a
Um,
Nobel Prize for it.
yeah.
Yeah,
um,
that's hardcore.
so I mean, I don't think I had seen that yet. I just seen in cars and stuff, the switch over to illuminating dashboards and stuff, and I just didn't think of it as having the enough intensity, I guess,
Hmm.
to compete with a metal halide or VHOs or T5s or. But yeah. But
There was a
then
long time there where they just seemed like they were going to be maybe like a kind of fun for nanos and
yeah.
maybe for like accessory lighting. I don't want to rehash the entire
No,
history
yeah.
of aquarium lighting, but fast forward to today, and we have the entire rainbow of lighting spectrum available at our fingertips. It's up to the manufacturer what diodes they include in what proportions, and we can just control them from our phone with programming for each channel ramping up and ramping down. Do you know how hard it was to ramp a metal halide or a VHO back in the day? Like the fluorescence, you had to put some like this metallic tape on there with leads going to the controller, and they could only dim it in like 20% increments and only down to 20%. And metal halide, like there was one random electronic ballast that could actually do the dimming, and it's just a whole. It's not even. We're not even talking the same species when it comes to lighting anymore.
Yeah, I had experimented with it a little bit early and didn't have the best experience, and then it got to the point just chatting with you all the time that okay, I'm definitely missing something here because it wasn't like you were okay, I've transitioned to LED. That was like history for you. That was ancient history, and you were espousing the pros and cons of the different LED manufacturers and fixtures. And I'm like, all right, what am I doing? I should jump back in. And then when I got the AIs, the whole interface to go from a T5 fixture or with a metal halide fixture to something that is cloud connected, and you pull your iPhone out and you can adjust spectrum. You can have different spectrums at different times of the day.
Mm.
It just I know, I'm sure everybody had that mind-blowing moment with it. Maybe I was a little later in the game to have that moment, but I was just like, why the hell have I not done this sooner? I remember being on vacation, and I wanted to see what was up with my tank, and I just was able to increase the lighting just a little bit, just so my cloud connected webcam could see better, and just, man, okay, everybody looks great, all right, resume schedule, and then close out the app. And I'm like, this is so great.
There are some In so many ways, when it comes to this reef aquarium gear, we've already stepped into the future.
Yeah.
We're already there. It's kind of mind blowing, but also like in the reef aquarium forums in the 2000s to 2010, everybody took real pride in the spectrum that they particularly selected. Like, what bulbs of metal halides are you using? What reflector? What ballast are what combination of T5s are you supplementing with? It was such a mark of pride. That was your recipe for spectrum, and now it's like it's really different because we're using the same light engine basically, but we're just driving it different ways, and that is really just, man, it's opening up a whole new world.
Yeah, I had posted a kind of a with a lot of humor, right? Because I everybody should do what they want to do, but I was like, what's with all these Windex tanks, right? And it was more just a joke because you go and look at full tank shots of people's reef tanks, and I know in person it's a different story, but blue tanks do not photograph well, right?
No, no, they just don't.
And so I'm like, this is not. It's not fun to like go to a full tank shot thread and look at everybody's tanks when they're all just Windex colored.
Blue rectangle, blue square.
Yeah, so I just made kind of a humorous jab about it, and so people were like, well, what do you light with? And I was like, well, here's a picture of my tank. I like it a lot more white. And then people were like, oh, what's your what are your settings? And I've got AI hydras as well, and it was so crazy. Like, I could literally download the file, the config file, put it on my Google Drive, and I don't know why these people, I'm like, hey, this is what I use. I'm not saying it's it's certified and good to go. Like, this is just what I use, and your mileage might vary, but they just went and downloaded and uploaded it to their lights.
So that is archaic. It sounds futuristic until I found out that the new max spec lights, I know we're getting a little sidetracked. I'm talking a lot about lights. There's so many topics I'm going to drill down to, but one hint of the future is max spec's new lighting platform. QR code.
There you go.
Simple QR code, right? So you can be in the app, scan a QR code, you have it. It's so funny that now the idea of, all right, I'm going to export my lighting program, I'm going to upload it or email it to somebody, and then they're going to download it, and then they're going to import it into their app or whatever, like, instead of just scanning a QR code. And it's one of the few times I've seen a feature come out, and I'm like, everybody needs to copy this. And if there was some cross-platform communication, oh my God. But that's the future. Yeah, just the dynamic profiles of lighting spectra, and people being able to fine tune the look of their tank using the exact same lights. That's just such a really fun field with the LED lightings. That's not to mention the power savings, the bulb cost replacement savings, the longevity of these lights, the versatility of these lights. I don't think we need to wax poetic about lighting too much. I think we can do a whole another session on lighting.
Yeah, that one's I think a lot of these are going to sound obvious if you've been in the hobby more recently. Mm-hmm. But, again, it's such a game changer from where we were to where we are now. And
these coral farms that have tank after tank after tank, dude, they would be bleeding money if they were using fluorescents or metal halides. It's just not possible with previous technology, right? That's why all the first coral farmers were greenhouses.
I remember that, yeah.
Right? Tropicorium, Steve Garrett. I think Tidal Gardens started with natural lighting and then went to kind of a mix of natural and artificial lighting. But yeah, these sprawling, coral farms in completely enclosed buildings, it just would not be economical with metal halides and fluorescents.
Yeah, those things are. That's one area I've always been jealous because you get to tinker with so many. The one downside is now it's just a module, right? It's not. You can tweak spectrums all day long, but it's still you're locked. It's a bit of a vendor lock-in at the same rate. So now I'm always like, oh man, I always have light envy when you're pop up with a new video and you're tinkering with a new fixture, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what that's like, you know? Because
Well, you don't have to wonder, brother. You're part of the
yeah,
team. But yeah, let's save some of this lighting talk for
agreed.
another
We
episode.
could talk all
But
day.
how about flow pumps? There used to be no such thing as a flow pump. They were power heads, and then there was an external, like actual centrifugal water pumps, and you had to modify the flow with a closed loop or an adductor. And now it's just like a whole world of propeller pumps with, a centrally mounted rotor or an externally mounted rotor that spins around the stator, and it's just so many variations. People just have no idea how much easier it is to move water now than it used to be. What was the most power heads you had in one tank trying to get good water flow?
Well, when I had my first 180, I don't know. I think I had like 6 or 8 Maxijets running in there. And then
Wow, that's
I,
crazy. Where do you plug that into anyway?
oh man, oh, I had a Red Sea Wave Maker. Remember those?
Wave maker.
No, I remember I had a decent job, but it's not like I could splurge on reef gear. But when the Tunzi streams came out, I remember there was a guy selling 2 of them on a forum used, and it was still like a big expenditure for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, I have to do this.
And those things were huge.
Yeah, they were.
They
but
were
they're
massive.
I mean, those things were just, again, a game changer. I hate to reuse that term, but like I popped 2 of those in. I replaced like 6 Maxijets, and I was blown away. I was like, that's. Granted, I mean, I did see the whole progression of them repurposing Maxijets with the DIY kits and all that.
That took a while.
I never
That took a-
tried
that took a
that.
while.
To be fair, I never did that experimenting. But
I sold a bunch. Was it Algae Free had that kit where
Yeah.
you got a little cage, this propeller that was the same size as the impeller, and then an algae magnet to hold it in place because it was so strong. Like, yeah, no, the water movers are just sensational nowadays. Incredible.
And
Like, we don't even have to work very hard,
no.
Like, I can put a Nero 3 in a 3-foot tank, and I only need another one when I want to alternate the flow. But one Nero 3 will move like 90 gallons of water with no issues.
Well, I remember when the Vortex came out, I was, because I remember they had started with the whole calc reactor, which is, a magnetic stirrer, and just that whole
Mhm.
evolution of like, well, we could do that with a pump. That blew me away of not having the cords in the tank. And then I think it was Interzoo where we saw a max spec showcase, or at least it was first
It was
sighting
called the
for me.
Riptide.
The Riptide, and I think you were the one that was like, dude, you need to call it a gyre. But yeah, when I saw that thing in Germany, I was like, man, every time I'm like, well, how much better can they make flow? Like something like that came out, and I was like, okay, that that's definitely an interesting design.
So a couple funny stories. I still remember seeing my first Vortec. I think it was at MACNA 2003, 2004 in Louisville, Kentucky area. And I was just blown away. I think Pat was there. I mostly remember meeting Patrick Clayson there. And I was just like, man, this is freaking crazy. And I signed up for the beta. And it was like towards the end of like my junior year of college. And I just so happened to have a little extra cash. And I bought 2 of Ecotech's first Vortec MP40s for $250 a piece.
That's good price.
Do you know why I bought 2? I bought 2 because I thought for sure there would be no way in hell that this company would continue making propeller pumps for $250, and I wanted a spare to rebuild the other one. Incredible, right? Just like absolutely mind-boggling how far some of these companies have come. I've actually since repatriated those those beta Vortex to Ecotech Marines. When you walk in, they have like this big shelf of like their prototypes and different units throughout the years, and yeah, no, that's just super cool, and that we're still using just an evolution of the MP40, MP20, or MP10 and MP60. And then when the gyre pump came out, I coined the term gyre. People were already doing some of this mass water flow, mass the whole tank water flow. And and the Max Spec, kindly just said, hey, can we name it a gyre? I was like, oh man, you can't name it a gyre because it's already out there, and that would be rah, 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 rah. And then they could all do the Riptide, and then it turns out someone else had a trademark on the name Riptide. It had nothing to do with water pumps, it barely something to do with aquariums. So then they fell back on the gyre, and then here we are all this time later with just incredible water movers. I mean, the design and the concept for propeller water pumps is so good that even some of the junky, like kind of knockoffs, are pretty good, and they're not going to hold up, super long term, but they're still very usable for about a year or two until their magnets lose a lot of intensity, and people don't realize that no matter how much you clean and service them, they're never going to be as strong again.
Well, you touched upon something I had written down for this conversation, that even the excuse my language, but the cheap shitty gear available today is like 10 times better than some of the stuff we even just 5+ years ago. I mean,
I'll take a 1-year-old used black box Chinese LED light from 2015 over like a bank of normal output or power compact fluorescents. Right? So that's an awesome point. Like, even the lowest end stuff is for reef. Now, freshwater gets a little bit deeper into the ditch, but even the lowest end stuff for reef is like infinitely better than the stuff we try to DIY on our tanks way back. And another thing that I really love, man. I mean, I think we can kind of combine some of the DC pump, the DC controllable pumps. Those are super
I have
awesome.
that written down.
I have everything written down. I'm thankful for everything.
Well, I mean, noise. Again, reef tanks were so freaking noisy back in the day, right? I remember trying to hunt for like the quietest PC cooling fans, like 4-inch fans to put in your canopy to cool your metal halides, but they were still loud. Then you had an AC return pump, an AC powered skimmer, AC flow pumps in your tank. It was just a ton of resonance and humming in your house, right? And then, of course, we had, Durso standpipes. We didn't even have the continuous siphon overflow.
Yeah, that just kind of minimized some of the gurgling.
Yeah.
But, God, I remember, like, really going down a rabbit hole trying to find the most quietest pump. And there was this company called Dolphin. They probably still make some of the larger pumps. And they had these smaller models with, like, this weird, like, hemispherical impeller that just somehow like totally quieted down. Like, it was the most silent pump on the market, and it heated up your tank like freaking crazy.
I remember that, yeah.
Oh my God, it got relabeled, by Core Life and then a few others, but yeah, they were like, dealing with heat, dealing with energy, dealing with noise. That is something that you really had to be super committed to reef tanks in order to have one, let alone have one in your living room.
Yeah, DC pumps are I love them.
Man, let's even like again a non-controllable single-speed, cheap Chinese DC return pump with just at least with a sine wave signal. I'll take that over freaking almost and everything but an Iwaki, an actual Iwaki, because those things are power. They're just gonna last for freaking ever. But yeah, and for me, it's just like, it's not so much about the return pump, but the protein skimmers. What we've been able to do with protein skimmers with just such better pumps, AC and DC.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I don't know the technology behind it, but maybe it's all in my head, but I feel like AC pumps have gotten quieter. I mean, I don't have a bad thing to say about the AC line of Seche pumps.
Yeah, no, but that's a company that's just, man, that's in their blood, right? Started by the father and then carried on by 4 daughters. Like, that is their DNA, was making these freaking pumps.
But I mean, building this new tank, in the basement in my current tank, I could get away with a little noise, but the tank is just quiet because the gear today is quieter. But here I am putting a tank back up in the main living space where there hasn't been the noise of trickling water and all this stuff for a couple of years, right? And so here I am putting this tank back in our family space, and I kicked on the return pump, and the only way I knew it was running was listening to that water go up the return pipe and come out of the lock line, right? That's how I knew it was
It's
running. And
it's the literal definition of incredible.
yeah,
You cannot credibly believe what you're seeing or not hearing. And it's man, it's only going to get better from here. That's the
yeah,
awesome part. But yeah, I think that's another thing that, that's probably another aspect that's really helped the hobby to thrive is that quiet factor. God, we used to have so many freaking tricks for quieting noisy equipment. It's not even funny. I mean, if you want just to compare and contrast, just go grab any mag drive pump, right? They haven't been changed. Those are workhorses. I use them for a couple things, especially water changes when I don't want to siphon out all the water. I just want to pump out some water. It's just funny because it's like such a nostalgic sound because you heard it for so long, but we had so many tricks for this stuff.
I have a massive mag drive in my salt mixing trash can in the basement to pump up to the tank upstairs. And when I had my old tank upstairs, that I used that mag drive, and it was just looking a little nappy, and I was like, I should probably replace it. So I replaced it with like the biggest AC CJ pump I could find, and plug that in and use that to pump salt water and stuff up. And I gave it a test run, and it's so much quieter.
It's not even the same
I don't
way,
even
but
need a quiet pump for that purpose, right? But it was just again such an improvement. Anyway,
man, how far have protein skimmers gone?
that's another example where even the shittiest protein skimmers are great. I have on my tank I run a Bubble Magoo. Is that how you say it? Magus?
I say Bubble Megas.
Whatever. That's what I run on my
Just
tank.
say it with confidence.
Yeah.
Bubble Magoose.
I like it. It sounds fancier. It's like going to Target. It's a Target.
Tarjay, that's right.
No, it's a great little skimmer. It was cheap. I threw it in there, and I was like, eventually I'll order something, up more my alley. But then I just never did. Just kept running.
So here's a funny little side note. Probably the longest running acrylic manufacturer in North America is Life Reef.
Yeah, Colorado
He
based.
is 5-10 minutes from where I live, and we have some spirited debates about needle wheels, and needle wheels have just totally taken over, bro. Just just get on with it. It's not a conspiracy to replace pumps, for people to upgrade. I mean, just the needle wheels have dominated. I still think there's a lot of room for Venturis in certain applications. I love my downdraft skimmers, but again, it's like having a metal halide. How much water are you supposed to like just throw into that skimming chamber to create that foam? It's just not responsible to use hundreds upon hundreds of watts just to drive one downdraft skimmer or one Venturi powered protein skimmer, unless you're a public aquarium. That's the only place I see them anymore because they have so much volume to process. But I'm sticking with your tagline if it's the particulars, but by and large, like, God, I still remember when needle wheel that was like a super exotic dream. That was the Aquamatic turbo floater. That was such an exotic piece of gear, and it had a different kind of needle wheel than we're used to today. But that was like a glimpse of the future back in 1999, and it just took a long time for it to catch up.
Yeah, I remember that was another big expenditure early in my career when I wasn't making a whole lot of money. Is I ordered a Euro Reef skimmer from California and replaced a ETS downdraft skimmer, and I just again when the clear acrylic suddenly looked like white acrylic, that was pretty impressive to me. Just because of all the micro bubbles.
Yes. The first awesome needle wheel skimmer I used would have been in 1999. There's a DAS Aquarium Systems,
Oh
DAS,
yeah, the
still
box,
in
the one in the
business.
box, or was it?
It was a box. It was a
Yeah.
total box, and I just remember, like all the protein skimmers had to break in, and then you had to dial in this and that and water level and air. And I remember turning this thing on, and just instantly, like this whipped cream head just came out like instantly. I was like, "What the hell is this?"
Yeah.
Because when I turned it on, I didn't even know it was a needle wheel until I took it all apart and cleaned it up, and it had an Aqua Bee pump in there, company that's still around. I have. What's funny is I have a couple year reef skimmers on the shelf just for giggles, and then I have a few Aquabee pumps actually in use. So it's nice that some of those companies are still around. But man, yeah, the protein skimmers are really crushing it these days.
Do you remember the company that popularized the cone?
ETB.
Yeah, I had an
Yeah, so
ATV skimmer. I remember that
yes, you
thing.
did. So they're still around. They're
Are they?
still around. Yeah, I just did a post about them a couple weeks ago, a month ago, and they've refreshed their product line with DC pumps running everything. A couple other tips and tricks. I think they probably had the first commercially available neck cleaner. Bro, I do not even have a. I don't have any automatic neck cleaners here, which I'm like. Some of these skimmers need it. The only neck cleaner I have is the manual one that comes with the Red Sea. Like, to every protein skimmer manufacturer out there, what are you doing?
I
Why
was
don't
about
you
to go
have
there.
a manual neck cleaner on everything over 100 gallons? Obviously, don't put it on a freaking nano model. But God, you guys, come on, get with the program. You can't patent that. It's just manual squeegee done.
I mean, that's the one compelling thing that makes me want to replace my cheapy skimmer for the new tank. Is I love the idea of I don't need a motor to do it. You know, I can just feed
Right.
my fish, kneel down, and give it a couple of turns every day, and then just have a nice long hose and drain the skimmate every once in a while. But really, when I decided I wanted that, I have two choices, which is Deltec and Red Sea, and
Make your
nothing
own.
bad to say about either, right? But
Make your own.
yeah, I guess you could.
I've tried a couple times, dude. It's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah.
There's a reason I haven't put that material out there. I've tried a couple times to grab like some squeegees. I'm like, this is hard. You really have to dial it in. But
I mean, you can
um,
buy them for any skimmer, right? I think.
manual,
No, the electric ones. But I don't
exactly.
want to. Yeah, exactly. I don't want any electronics. I just want to keep it simple.
So again, I'm not trying to plug anything. We're gonna stay on track. But my Red Sea Reefer skimmer has a giant cup. It has a see-through window. That is
I
a
do
Red Sea
like that. That's
patent.
cool.
And it has a neck cleaner built right into the lid. And that is the only skimmer at the studio that might go a few weeks between cleanings, because we can just twist the lid, clean the inside, then we have the window, we can see inside, we have a giant capacity cup, and it's like, all right, it's going. We don't need to clean it every freaking week. We try to clean all the skimmers every week because, we run them that way. But yeah, just wish there was a controllable DC option
I
for
was
that
about to
one.
say I like the Deltec because it has the DC pump, and again, noise is a big deal for me for what I'm trying to set up. But then that price tag's a little, like it may take me a little bit to get there. But um, I'm in no rush. But yeah, I agree. Every skimmer should have that.
Why are there more automatic neck cleaner options than manual neck cleaner options? There's something else. There's something else in the hobby that seems like the cart before the horse. I think it's going to come to me through this, but that is one of those. Like, why are there more? Now, instead of saying what we like, we're talking about what we don't like. But we need more manual neck cleaner option. Like, you could start up, to any entrepreneurs out there, you could start up an entire company retrofitting manual neck cleaner lids for every brand.
Well, I really
Please, someone
like
do that.
Avast Marine, right? I like a lot of things he builds, and I was actually thinking about that. Like, he makes an electric powered neck cleaner, and I'm like, why don't you put out one that just has a dial on the top, right?
Yeah. It's the difference between cleaning your skimmer once a week and once a month.
Yeah.
It's kind of a big deal. Yeah, it's a good one. That's a good. So we're talking about protein skimmers, and there's a lot of improvements that have been made over the years, and there's just so much more plug and play than it used to be. I used to have to talk a customer through the steps of installing a protein skimmer. Go ahead and plug it in, open up, whatever adjustment valve as much as possible, and then raise it up to a certain level, and then do some adjustments on the air, and now you can really put a protein skimmer right into your sump or your filtration area, and they're just really, really good to go.
Yeah, like I said, for me, even the cheapest skimmers are great. They're fairly easy to dial in, provided I've had, my one suggestion besides like a neck cleaner is maybe, I don't know if it means they got to make them taller or what, but maybe make them a little more tolerant of varying water levels once you get into like the deeper zone, because a lot of these, like a Red Sea tank, the skimmer compartment is around 9 inches of water. And when you look at like the operating height recommendations for a lot of skimmers, it'll be around 6 to 8 inches. So I don't have a skimmer stand for mine, and it runs okay, but it's definitely like if you get it in a little bit shallower water and they got to fight gravity a little bit more, they're a little easier to dial in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, your point about the protein skimmer stands is just highlights this gap between the sumps and the protein skimmers, and I think that's a function of a lot of protein skimmers going with the pipeless protein skimmer design.
Yeah,
it was a moment in Reef Aquarium history when Cad Lights released the first pipeless skimmer, and like overnight, like so many protein skimmers all of a sudden were pipeless. That just pipeless means that we used to. I mean, we still do on some plenty of protein skimmers have a bayonet fitting or some kind of different mechanism for the outflow of the protein skimmer. But like the Red Sea and the Dalua just have these little valves basically now that you open up and down. And they're a little bit more finicky when it comes to deeper water. But the Seachem kind of goes back to the roots, kind of like the Euroreef, by having that tall standpipe. And that is why I'm a huge fan of the Aquavitro Division protein skimmer. It's not like it's never going to win any powerhouse awards, like not even close. But they do the job, and they have this long contact time. They don't need a conical body. So you get back to that long contact time, and because they use a smaller pump, because there's longer contact time, they're just natively quieter, like really, really good. I would have loved to see more progress on the needle wheel side of things, right? We're still stuck with the same needle wheel for a while. We had the mesh wheel, and then there was like a titanium alloy mesh wheel, and then ATI had a 3D printed grid wheel, which I'm pretty sure you could mold with some challenges. Yeah. The grid wheel was freaking crazy, but we're talking about things we love about protein skimmers today. And definitely the protein skimmers are crushing. Even like the AC protein skimmers, they're doing really, really good work.
So I've got a question. You've got experience with a lot of different skimmer brands. One thing that always gave me a bit of a hiccup with Toonsy, and now also I see it on the Seachem skimmer, is that filter sock. Is it?
I took it off.
Okay.
Never used it.
So what happens to the water? I mean, it's a dumb question.
Nothing. It flows. It flows down the outflow pipe, just like on a Euroreef, and it's as quiet as it could ever be. I don't know.
So it's a non-issue. I mean,
it's a non-issue. I took sometimes I would actually use the Toonsy Dock 9410 on purpose because I knew I could get a media reactor out of that secondary sock.
Yeah.
That nylon sock. I would literally just put media in there to help filter the tank, and then boom, there's my media reactor. But on my Toonsy skimmers, I have never used them for microbubbles. And I used them as is for a while on the Seachem protein skimmers. But bro, don't tell Seachem this. I took off the entire water level control mechanism and I just cut the standpipe down to size. Because thankfully they use like standard tubing, and I used them for a while as is, and then that stocking just kind of became really long, and it was a little silly to have all this stuff. Once you've got it dialed in and you know what water level you want it to be, it just simply works. It just really, really works. Yeah, I totally just got rid of the water level adjustment totally, because I knew what level I needed the standpipe at. So no water level adjustment, no water sock, protein skimmers rock.
All right.
Yeah, yeah. I think we really need to talk about dosers, because in our day that was not a thing. Do you know what a dosing pump was back in 1995? It was an air pump
Oh no.
pumping into a chamber, a sealed chamber, to displace the
You're
fluid.
talking about.
I think
Yeah, I remember that.
that was a dosing pump from back in the day, and the only dosing pump you could get was refurbished medical
I was about to
equipment.
go there. Well, no, you had the two little fishies, Varios or whatever. It was like this yellow peristaltic dosing pump, but I couldn't afford
Yep.
it, so I'd go on eBay, and
That was a non-controllable pump. though.
yeah, but I mean,
That had no controls. You had to control it yourself. It was just on off. I have one on the shelf
Nice.
for fun.
that's a classic piece of history. No, but yeah, I would go on eBay, and there was a guy who would sell used medical dosers for hospitals because I guess they would have to replace them every few years.
Was that the Sentinel?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. And they were still, secondhand medical was like 300 plus.
And the dosing
for-
tubing line was it was way tinier than like airline tubing, so it always clogged.
And it was so specific. And so, but even when you got one of those, like you could set the rate, but you couldn't do any programming.
Yeah.
Right? And so last week, Red Sea dropped a brand new Reef dose.
Yeah.
Mark hasn't seen this
I
yet
haven't.
because we're recording this a week in advance. But yeah, Red Sea's got them. Ecotech Marine, Bubble Makers has them. God, I don't want to. GHL's got them. I mean, everybody's got a dosing pump. Everybody's got a dosing pump. And for the same price as a single channel dumb dosing pump, now you're getting like 3 to 4 channels with all kinds of programming functions, wireless connectivity, and it's just the process of adding any additive, like down to the drop, like super accurate, has never been easier. And man, that just unlocks so much more potential for nanotanks, for dosing traces, for doing tricky stuff like kind of more scientific, for raising your pH by dosing your buffer continuously or every hour. It's incredible how much progress is enabled by these smarter functions.
Yeah, I have the Kumur. Is that the?
Yeah, and so Camware is one of the only companies that does just that.
Yeah, the one with the rainbow colors, right? 4 heads,
Mm-hmm.
super affordable. The app for it is fantastic.
Yeah.
Wi-Fi. First you connect to Bluetooth, you get it on your Wi-Fi. But it's just awesome. I mean, that it has like the whole app connected concept that I'm interacting with this thing through my phone through an app. Fantastic. I mean, just absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely.
You know,
I love how this entire like trip of discussing the modern aquarium hobby is also a trip down memory lane, because when it comes to the gear, we are absolutely living in just such a golden age of aquarium technology. Freshwater and saltwater aquarium technology. I mean, I still remember like a freaking solenoid valve just costing like $100, and now I can find them AC, DC, pre-wired, unwired, any way I want, for freaking like $10 on Amazon. It's crazy what you can do nowadays. Yeah, the technical aspect, and I'm sure there's some other stuff that we haven't really talked about as much, because I want to save some time for the software, which would be, the livestock, and the community. But like water tests have gotten a lot better. We have ICP testing services for the fringes. I think ICP is a little bit more for the fringe, not for the everyday water testing, when you want to see if some trace elements are down or if certain heavy metals are building up. But before, that was just like, well, corals died. I don't know why. And you just had to move on. And now you can set a test, an ICP water testing service to like any number of companies on any number of continents. And within a reasonable amount of time, like a week or less, you can get at least some insight into what's going on there. And man, I'm a super big fan of the Hannah checkers. I was lukewarm when
Oh
the
yeah.
calcium one first came out, and then they started including the zero.1 milliliter, testing titrator or pipetter. And now, man, me and two other people can do the test just back to back to back, right next to each other. Similar protocols, and you'll just get the exact same number.
Yeah, I use their ALK checker, and
Why would you do anything else?
well, and especially with two-part because, again, personal opinion, I don't really care where my calcium is as long as I'm dosing my A and B in equal parts, right?
Hallelujah.
So,
we did a big round of water testing on a bunch of tanks
Yeah.
today, and Evan was asking if it was okay if there's any residue left in the vials or something because he cleaned out some vials. We did a bunch of water tests. I'm like, bro, if the calcium falls between 375 and 500, it's all right. I don't really care. Just tell me what that alkalinity is to the 0.1 DKH, and then we're good.
yeah, I mean, it's like, all right, here's my target ALK. Wherever my calcium ends up, if I'm adding 40 of that and 40 of this, that's good, So, but that just makes the whole beauty of the fact that their ALK checker takes all of 30 seconds even better,
Yeah.
I'm not a big tester, but when it comes to changing two-part solution, which I've been doing now for a while because a calcium reactor doesn't really make sense on a softy tank. I do have my georeactor still in storage for the day I get the SVS bug, but yeah, I mean, you need an ALK checker to see where things are at, and the fact that it's so painless, like I don't have an excuse, I'm just lazy.
No, absolutely. And the other thing that's kind of crazy is, oh my God, I just blanked out.
Talking about test kits,
Additives.
Oh,
Additives haven't really changed. Debate me. Have they really changed? I mean, that is one of those few things that has been around for a really long time. And fundamentally, it's like, all right, you and I are using Salifer coralline amino acids in the late 90s and early 2000s, and there's some better options for that now. But in an additive space, it's just, I don't know, it's just, elemental, right? Calcium, magnesium, alkalinity. The traces are maybe a little bit more accessible, full, like a broad spectrum trace additive or individual additives if you really want to target something. But I don't think it's changed very much.
the one I'm curious about, but it's kind of pricey on a large tank, is the I think it's calcium formate, or it's the Alpha Reef from Tropic Marin.
Yeah. No, you're right. The carbocalcium.
Yeah, is that calcium
Well,
formate? What is it?
I don't know, but I'm letting some other people do that experimentation.
Somebody's gonna comment that I got that totally wrong, and I apologize. But why do I like it? Well, one, it's just one thing to dose. So we'll see if it holds up. But it seems like for the people that are using it, they're pretty happy with it. And I don't believe it increases your salinity. And for a guy that doesn't like to do water changes, my biggest beef with two-part is my salinity goes up, so I have to exchange salt water for RO water, right?
You said you had a reminder once a month to check your salinity.
I have to, yeah, because especially
I check my salinity anyway.
well, because I forget, right? And there were a couple times where I'm like, something's not right here. What's up with this tank, And then I start doing all my checks. I'm like, oh crap, my salinity's gone through the roof. And you know me, when I ran a calcium reactor, I didn't do a water change for like a year, and I did that ICP test out of curiosity, and everything came back stellar. And I was like, well, then why the hell am I doing water change? Well, like, why should I feel compelled to do a water change? But that's a different story. But now that I'm on a two-part, I'm like, well, I have to, right? I have to swap out about where I'm at. I have to change about 10 gallons a month of salt water to fresh water to keep my salinity in check. And so,
man, you'd be dosing so much.
Yeah, I guess. But that's where calcium, Alpha Reef, right, looks interesting to me. But I mean, I think it's kind of pricey for the amount I would have to dose. I would love to see it either be more. I mean, I know you can make your own with the powders and all that, so maybe that's a route I go. But so I kind of want to see where that plays out. That might be a big change, a shift from 2-part if it's effective.
I would say, though, that fundamentally the additive space just hasn't changed that much. There's a lot of people making it. It's probably cleaner than ever. There's a lot more understanding. Man, when I was a kid, like, trying to connect the dots between alkalinity and carbonate hardness and the buffer, it just sounded like 3 different things. It was so hard for my young brain, and I still remember the moment it clicked. I'm like, oh my God, these are the exact same freaking things. And it's just the other major building block of calcium carbonate aragonite that our corals are made of. You know, it's like, it's so much harder. It was so much harder then to really wrap your head around it, but now it's just like, oh yeah, it's just another building block. But on the additive space, I just don't think, it's mature. And a lot of people can get into it, and a lot of people can mix it themselves. The thing that's funny is, like, now that we're really talking about all this stuff, the fundamentals of a calc reactor have not changed. The fundamentals of a calcium reactor also haven't changed. And there's been one major breakthrough, with Destaco and Deltec making these automatic calcium reactors that work on CO2 saturation that don't need a pH probe or a pH controller. That's it. That's about it. You could still pull out a knob calcium reactor from 1996 and slap it on your tank today, and nothing would really be different, right?
It's true.
Or a corelith, or a geo, right? It's just a recirculating chamber, and whether or not you want to use a pH probe is up to you. I thought it was so funny, I got a lot of really funny comments when I posted the video, the CChem calcium reactor, my 10 tips on things to know about a calcium reactor. And you and I are like, pH probe? Nah, I don't want one. I just don't want one. I'm just going to test the effluent for pH and for alkalinity output, check my bubble rate a little bit. You don't have to. That's the thing that's changed, though. Like, people have kind of lost some of that know-how when it comes to the calcium reactors. But yeah, you could use any calcium reactor from any era today, and maybe switch out the pump if it's a noisy one or if it's not powerful enough. But at the end of the day, you're still just moving water around.
Well,
it's
today's gospel is you must have a pH controller that with a solenoid for your CO2. It seems like I hear the word must a lot. And then when I first bought my georeactor, and the very first reactor was like the one he built for himself because I couldn't afford one of his like nice ones. He's like, well, I got the one I, experimented. I can sell you that real cheap. And that thing ran great. But eventually I got like a real nice geo. But when I went to go figure out how to run it, it was like, if you have a pH probe, here's what you can do. And if not, you can use alkalinity as another reference point to tune your reactor. And I guess even though now I have pH probes, I always just eyeballed it, like once you get to know one, you kind of know like, okay, I just need a reasonable drip and I just need a reasonable bubble rate and whatever. And then again, you kind of end up in some alk range that you're happy with. Well, that I'd be happy with. Like, again, if you're chasing numbers, good luck with that. But if you're like, it's like, all right, well, calcium's staying up and the alk's in a decent range. All right, I guess it's working, and then you just went on with your day. I mean, that's that, so they in a way that like, it's like making something more complicated than it needs to be. I mean, there are risks, and when you're messing with CO2, and you could definitely nuke your tank and drop the pH too far, and
You'd have to really not be watching your tank for a long time.
Yeah, and again, it's like that. It's kind of like our talk about RO. Like, you don't know who you're dealing with when somebody asks you a question, like, do I need a pH probe for my calcium reactor? And it's kind of like I don't want somebody to come back and yell at me because they nuked their tank. So you give that blanket answer, but.
It's the blanket backstop answer to the particulars. But let's stay on track to the things we love.
I digress.
You're right. You're right. I mean, calc reactors, calcium reactors pretty much stay the same. We've had a couple breakthrough. But let me broach my favorite, just top 10, 1, 2, 3 through 10 favorite thing about the reef aquarium hobby today. And that has got to be the availability of corals.
Yeah, I had something similar written down. I can't keep up with the coral number of coral vendors anymore. It used to be like I had like 5 or 6 bookmarks, of places
Yeah.
to go check out what they had. Holy crap, man! It's like I don't know all the coral vendors anymore. I can't keep tabs on them.
Not so much the vendors, but just
The availability of
crazy
yeah.
variety of corals.
Okay,
Like
I
I
see what you're
remember
saying.
going to. First of all, there was no such thing as a saltwater aquarium shop. I really should have put that down. Let's back it up. LFS. There was no such thing as a saltwater aquarium store. There was. Let me just repeat that. There was no such thing as a saltwater aquarium store. Not that I know of. Not that I saw. Like in my part of the country, you were lucky if you found a really good aquarium store that had a very saltwater, strong saltwater tank presence, And then over time, it was just like, initially, they would have one tank that had some saltwater fish, that had like a handful of corals, and a handful of invertebrates, right? Because we kept a lot more invertebrates back in the day. We would have feather dusters and anemones and crabs and clams and scallops. Your reef tank had so many more invertebrates than today. I got as I'm saying this, I'm like, man, I need a lot more feather dusters in my tanks. Like I have a lot of clams, like giant clams. And but yeah, it was just if you found one person looking at that saltwater tank at the same time as you did in a tank full of freshwater tanks, like in a store full of freshwater tanks, you were instantly friends, and you're like, what's your size of your tank? What are you running? How are you doing it? And so like the saltwater stores now, they're all coral farmers. A lot of them are also, fish quarantiners, if that's a word. And God, I remember going to store after store, and it was like 20 corals. 20 different corals you might run into, right? Trackies, acanthophilias were not called acanthophilias, but they were $99 for a solid red one with a green mouth. And, a few leather corals, maybe like a pall of parietes. You never saw an acro anywhere. And, like a couple zoanthids. Like, I mean, you're talking about literally there was 20 different types of coral to pick from.
Yeah.
And that was it. And like, a quarter of those were shrooms. A quarter of those were like discosomas. Another half of them would just be like leather corals and sarcophyton, but not with green polyps. And that's the thing that I love today. Like, you could set up 3 tanks of different types of sarcophytons, and they'd all be different. And some of them could be small, some would be big. And the variety available today is just, it's unimaginable compared to 20 years ago.
Yeah, the availability has definitely shifted. My store here is fully marine. What's funny to me is what's hard to find now is like a shop that has cool, interesting freshwater stuff. I can't find that, right? Like, you got your Petcos and your PetSmarts, but if you are really into like interesting freshwater fish, if you're into African cichlids, or you're getting into discus and anything like that, that's hard to find now.
I wouldn't say it's hard to find.
In my area,
It's hard to find at your local fish store, like at an average store. We have great communities and Aquabid, and every group is hyper specialized. Like the freshwater, man. The discus people never talk to the angelfish people. The African cichlid people never talk to the Central American people. Like very little overlap. And if you want some of the cooler stuff, like that's still kind of true. But when it comes to saltwater, goodness, man, like if you look up your yellow pages for any area now, at least half of every store is saltwater.
Yeah.
Completely exclusively saltwater. It's like it's not even funny. But that's that's something that we take for granted, that so many shops absolutely specialize not only in saltwater, but like they have their own frag tank, they got their own show tank, they're growing some stuff out. They're not going to sell you that coral because they're going to frag it up. It's incredible how much things have changed.
I would say the other piece that, if we're going to talk about livestock, is I truly could not have imagined the diversity in maricultured corals, as well as captive bred and captive reared marine fish.
Yep.
It's still, I still have kind of a wow moment when I start to think about, that we have captive reared and bred angelfish, tangs.
Yeah, angelfish.
I mean,
Angelfish.
what?
Man, we spent like 20 freaking years only enjoying clownfish. And there was no varieties. There was no varieties. The first variety was a wide bar, right? An ocellaris with a slightly wider bar. And then the second variety might have been the black ocellaris, right? But I want to give a shout out to my homie Ali, who named the first Picasso clownfish, and that blew up on Reef Central, and he ended up selling that fish to ORA, probably for like nothing compared to today's numbers. And when I was at ORA a number of years ago, it was still there. The founding broodmare of all the Picasso clownfish was still productive at ORA like 15 years later.
That's pretty awesome.
I don't know if she's still there, but yeah, I mean, for a long time it's like, okay, we've got a few really crummy looking dottybacks, then some captive grown clownfish, and
That was,
anything else.
I always had that debate, if, let's just say, there was a ban on all wild collected things globally, or like the import of anything wild into the United States, would you still set up a marine tank? And, a while back, I'd be like, well, yeah, you'd still see me with a pair of captive bred clowns and hopefully a bubble tip anemone that was, cloned off of somebody. And then, of course, plenty of corals from frags and stuff. But then now it's like, oh, yeah, I could have some tangs and angelfish and,
little bit
gobies
of
and
everything.
blennies. And, I mean, just, I would have a nice reef tank. You could set up a nice reef tank completely based off captive bred and
That was
captive
such
propagation.
a bleeding edge concept just a few short years ago, of having a tank full of exclusively aquacultured livestock. But I want to get back to the coral variety.
All right, let's do it.
Any person can go down any of the rabbit holes. You want to collect just Euphyllia? There's enough of those for you to never run out. Just zoanthids, just chalice corals, just montes. Acros, you almost have to bifurcate that. Like, all right, do you want the high energy acros, or do you want the deep water acros? Everybody's like super gung-ho right now for all the crazy freaking tenuous and the rainbow millies and the holy grail torches. And I'm like, can I get some deep water acros over here and some bubble corals, please? But yeah, the variety and the diversity is just across the board insane. Like, I still remember you and I going shopping for some freaking just solid red, blood red chalice corals. We paid a whole whopping like $40 a frag, which at the time we're like, man, that should be like $40 a colony. When we went to Cappuccino Bay and everybody got a piece of that, we made them chop it up on the spot. They didn't want to at first. That was awesome, man. But yeah, you can go down any one of these rabbit holes, soft corals, LPS, and just never run out of things to blow your mind.
It is. It's crazy.
I just want to set the stage a little bit. I don't want to be a super old timer,
No.
but I want to kind of paint a picture for everybody who's listening right now, everybody who's been reefing for about 10 to 12 years, right? Rewind the clock to, let's just call it 2003. The Bali farmed corals, which introduced every kind of deep water. And we're talking echinatas, we're talking red dragon, suharsenoi was a pipe dream, and Australia didn't open up till 2007. We had never seen
Strawberry shortcake
strawberry shortcake We had never seen any Australian scolies. We'd never seen Duncans. There were so few Duncans. Like, we'd seen pictures of them. We knew they existed. Lords, don't, oh my God. Like, we were getting some Lords and they were crazy price, man. Every Lord that was imported, like that first year when Australia opened up, 2007, I still just, I remember my disbelief. And they were like, oh yeah, we're going to start getting shit from Australia. I was like, no, that's not possible. That's just not possible. We got Duncans, Mosleas, Scolies, Bauer Bankies came in with that. Wilson Ice came in with that. Like, not to mention the corals we could already get from other places that were just that much crazier from Australia. Like, just crazy town. But even within Indonesia, the growth of the reef aquarium hobby has, blowing the doors off doesn't even quite capture it, as far as like how much more coral we can get and how much diversity within each coral. I'm talking about Samicora, man. Like, I can't even, there was a point where I could tell you every single strain of every coral that had ever been in the aquarium hobby. And now it's like, nah, there's too many Stylociniellas. I never thought anybody would ever care about that coral. Samicora, like, that was such a weird niche coral that no one would ever care about. And now I'm like, I don't even know how many colors there are just of the branching form. Right? You got the green, orange. I've got a neon oranger one. Someone was hitting me up about a yellow one that they came across very recently. Not to mention the encrusting strains, and on and on and on. And so, like, yeah, when it comes to the coral diversity, it's just, it's mind-blowing. But back to your point, aquaculture has taken this huge, incredible biodiversity of corals and made it available to more people than ever.
Yeah, and even when you look at mariculture, there were always the corals that I assumed were easy to frag and, glue and stick on a rack in the ocean. But, some of the species that I'm seeing that are maricultured are, some of those LPS that we would avoid fragging in the aquarium hobby,
Blastos.
Yeah. And so it's even like the corals that I thought, we may have to always rely on wild versions of those because they're just not really up for being fragged. And then I think it was a discussion I had with Vincent long ago in person when he was here, where he was like, no, man. And he's like, those things, I forget which coral we were talking about. But he's like, he would just say you could chop them, throw them back in the ocean, and they would heal and grow. And so then that was even just a, like, holy crap moment. Like, we can mariculture those species of corals as well. We don't have to kind of relegate those that are like, oh, we're only ever going to be able to get the wild versions of those type of a lot of LPS and stuff like that, right?
There's very few corals left that are just non-propagatable, right? In aquariums, we can propagate Catulophilia elegans coral, but they don't really do that in the ocean. But so we're pretty much left with Cinerinas, Acanthophilias, and Trachyphilias. Those are the only corals that cannot really be asexual, and long tentacle plate corals.
Yeah.
Everything else, bubble corals, Lobophilia, Symphilia, Blastomusa is incredible how much is being
well, and the variety of blastos now. Some of the colors I'm seeing, what the hell, man? Yeah. Where'd those come from?
Yeah. It's why is it that everything was so cookie cutter?
Yeah.
For like a decade.
It's the same blastos.
You want a Blastomusa, you get a red one, or if you're fancy, you get a green mouth red one.
Yeah.
That's it. One or the other, right? And then all of a sudden it's like rainbow, orange, pink, pastel, green skirt, on and on and on. But you can say that about freaking everything, every kind of coral, every kind of anemone. God, I mean, we could do a whole episode on just the diversity of corals and strains and varieties and grafted varieties, and I'm just very much looking forward to the future. I think my pinnacle personal, bucket list thing is going to be to spawn some corals. Actually going to be speaking on the phone with Jamie Craggs tomorrow about making some concerted efforts to do that.
Well, and to that point, like I said about that hypothetical question, that gives me hope. I mean, there's a lot of concern about regulation and all this stuff, but I think we're getting to a point where the availability of fish that, as long as these regulations, if they continue to go in the direction that they've been going, as long as they recognize the difference between mariculture and aquaculture, right? And they don't do something like where CITES was trying to grab it from it getting imported, right? It's like, well, hey, like I remember they were trying to ban euphyllias, and it didn't matter if it came from somebody's tank and it crossed state lines, and I don't know, but as long as they recognize those efforts and allow those that progress to continue, like I think the hobby is going to be all right. Like if you told me tomorrow that this new tank I'm setting up, I could only do aquacultured, maricultured, and captive bred or captive reared
wouldn't
fish,
skip a beat.
I'd be like, all right,
You wouldn't skip a
might
beat,
cost me a little
man.
more, but I mean,
Yeah, it might take a little bit longer time, but yeah, I mean, I definitely have a few tanks where, actually most of my tanks are all cultured, all, whether it's farmed or grown in captivity. And I think the one thing tying all of this together, and a great note to end on, is the reef aquarium community. There used to probably be, let's say, 5,000 reefers, 10,000 reefers, max when you and I were starting this up. And now it's just not even countable. You'll have almost that many people at a reef aquarium conference over a weekend. But between the groups, the forums, the actual clubs, and the conferences, there's just so many opportunities for the community to get together and share notes and compare ideas. It's crazy. It's incredible. I had no idea that I would be able to make a career gabbing about reef tanks, whether it's on articles or videos or podcasts. That wasn't even an option when I was younger. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna grow up and I'm gonna own a fish store, because that's the pinnacle, right?
yeah, I mean, I'm definitely happy and envious that path, was put in front of you. In the 90s, when I graduated with my biology degree, I had a crap ton of student loan debt to pay off, and I was doing some fun things here and there that were biology related, but then like the people I was working with that were 10 years older than me were waiting tables at night and balancing, everything. And I fully admit, like I was like, well, I'm also interested in the computer side of things, and so I went that route. But back then there was not a lot of I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I didn't see much opportunity in the trade, right?
It was very limited, unless you were literally going to farm fish or service accounts or work at a fish store or maybe one of a handful of companies.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
like a
just so
monopoly
freaking
of like
limited.
manufacturers making aquarium equipment. And now you got people that are 3D printing stuff, and they're manufacturing reef keeping gear. I mean, the backstory on the Ecotech, right? You've got people making careers on YouTube. It's just fascinating, and I'm happy, right? I'm happy that there are people that are pursuing this passion and making it a career, and that there's so many variety of avenues to do that. Whereas when I graduated in '99, I didn't really see that on the horizon. And I've I'm happy with my life, obviously. I have no regrets, but I've always wondered, like, if I had graduated today, like, would I have
Oh my God.
would I have chosen a different path, right? Because of those opportunities. So and that's just yet another, I mean, forget me. It's another way to emphasize how much this hobby has changed over 20 years for the better.
One of the biggest requests I get from the industry is people to hire.
Really? That's
Yeah,
interesting.
they need reps. They need people to do services, aquarium maintenance. They need people in their stores. They need people in their farms. They need people just all over the place. And it's like we have our own cottage, an actual industry, right? It's not like a little toy thing. We're not doing talking about toy fish anymore. It is incredible, and it's really astounding just how many people it reaches today, from just the lowest income person who's really trying to scrap together enough money with some used equipment and some secondhand stuff, and a lot of free frags. They can do so much, and then you have the most affluent people, spending tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars on a fish room or fish wing of their entire house. And that bleeds over to freshwater too. You're just seeing so much. You know what it boils down to? Culture. We have our own aquarium culture with our subgroups of people who focus on the rare fish, and people who focus on certain groups of corals, and people who are all about the gear. And then, one great example is this place called Ohio Fish Rescue, a place that literally just takes in overgrown freshwater fish and relies on donations to just house these fish, the same way that there's been like parrot rescues and dog rescues for like freaking years. And it's just incredible that it's grown to such a size that we have so much sophistication just across the board. It's an amazing, amazing time to be an aquarist of any type.
Yeah, I agree. I one area that I see the future developing now is, and it almost crosses over in the realm that I'm in, is as all these things are getting cloud connected or cloud driven, right? So you've got companies that are like, hey, we're going to sell you this really cool reef light. You can just connect with your iPhone, and so now you're talking about API development. Now you're talking about hosting services in AWS or some other cloud solution provider like Azure. Now you got to have people that manage all of that cloud infrastructure for you and help build that. So it's funny, like I imagine you're going to see IT people like working for reef companies.
Oh, I think some already.
Well, I think it's already there. I think it's going to scale even more. I think where we made comments about things being kind of behind on the controller side and stuff at times,
I would never.
I'm a controller fan. I love my Apex,
okay.
but
I control everything without a dedicated controller.
But I think that I imagine you probably know the industry folks better. They're part of the thing that they need now to do the ideas that they want to do is probably hire more developers, right? I mean, somebody's got to build that app on your phone. Somebody's got to make sure that app, whatever change you make, gets pushed out to whatever server. I'm imagining it's something in AWS, let's just say hypothetically, and comes back down to whatever device is running over your reef tank, or if it's over Bluetooth, that's a different story. But they are probably there's probably developers that are just, that's what they're doing. And I always joked when I was in IT, the guy that has that IT job that works for that company probably doesn't even keep a reef aquarium and hates him or something, I'm really into backpacking. I'm like, I bet the guy that manages the infrastructure for REI doesn't even like to go hiking or something but that was just a joke I always had, right?
It's probably more than one guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think this really puts a nice bow on everything that we've been talking about, that the reef aquarium hobby has really blossomed into a microcosm of our modern life, right? I mean, we have access to more food than we've ever had, more diverse food than we've ever had, more beers, more ingredients, more services, and all of that translates one-to-one to the reef aquarium hobby. All the gear is better. We have more choice, more selection, more livestock. I mean, more choice of tanks. I mean, you used to walk into an aquarium store and you could buy an all-glass aquarium or bust. All glass aquarium was the name of the brand. It's not just
well,
a
if you were
description.
fancy, you got an oceanic.
which was owned by Hourglass
Yeah.
Aquarium, you know. But so it's definitely a reflection of our modern world and our modern life and the Internet of Things and connected devices and just everyone elevating their understanding of. IT and connectivity and networking and chemistry and biology, like all of this, we're all collectively just getting a lot smarter, whether we like it or not.
Agreed. I
Yeah.
There's one that is more where I think is going to be a game changer of the future, and somebody will pull this up in 10 years and be like, well, he was wrong. But I think it's bacteria. I'm really rooting for the aquabiomics guys. It's, to me, it's like data mining, right? You start to aggregate all this data and you don't know what to do with it. But eventually, when you have enough data, you start to correlate trends. And I think that the more people that get their tanks tested and start to learn what their bacterial biome looks like, I think we're going to learn a lot of interesting things. I think it could potentially help with pathogens and parasites. It could help with, yeah. I think that'll be, I think a lot of interesting things will bubble out of that. You know, right now we've got these bacteria in a bottle solutions to cycle a tank, but there's so much diversity that you just can't see with the human eye that's going on in your tank.
Right.
And the fact that there's significant differences between like your tank and my tank in that biome, you know, I'm curious. I'd love to revisit
I think
that
you're
one.
getting ahead of yourself. We need to save some of this material for a
What's the
Reef
future?
Tanks of the Future
Okay.
session. And but you're absolutely right. Shout out to the Aquabiomics guys. Do a little quick search on aquabiomics.com or Aquabiomics on Reef Builders, because there's definitely a lot more we can learn about reef aquarium and just general aquarium bacteria. But yeah, I think we've covered a huge scope of just what is really truly awesome about the reef aquarium hobby today, and it's just going to be super exciting to see it evolve for another couple decades.
Agreed, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you've stuck with it. You know, that's another thing we'll talk about is, just how to stick with the hobby when you're not like fully into it as a hobbyist. But yeah, Mark, thank you for joining me on this session of Reef Therapy. Thank you to all our listeners. If you made it this far, man, you better freaking drop us a review on our
This might be a
podcatchers.
long one, so I appreciate the patience as somebody who made it to the end of this one.
Yeah, I mean, but that's one of the most common comments that we get is like, yo, I could listen to
The
this
long
again
format,
and again, listen to it longer. You know, you and I just, we take 45 minutes to warm up. So I think with that, we'll put a pin in it, and hope you guys are really enjoying these Reef Therapy sessions, and we'll catch you guys very soon on another session. So till next
Next time.
Bye, guys.